looking at the Silbury a lot longer than we Americans have been looking at our mounds. Why have they not explained Silbury by now? Why did this colonial have to do it? I'd much rather go fishing. They seem content only to measure it, or dig holes in it in a search for whatever. Well, listen up, blokes. Dig all you want, because you won't find anything in it. Silbury falls under the category of a significant mound. What does that mean? As we already know, Silbury is the largest mound anywhere in Europe. Significant. Let me show you what that means to the global matrix system. When we divide Silbury's grid latitude by its grid longitude, we get the value of its coordinate intersect, or CI. As members of a largely literary culture, most people today are not comfortable trying to memorize long numbers, especially irrational numbers. So let's apply some algebraic law and give this value the letters SCI for Silbury's coordinate intersect. SCI, 720 degrees and 30 degrees. The product shows a number which encodes still another set of coordinates, which are easily memorized. 38, 39, 37, almost poetic. 38, 39, 37.14. There they are again, on Munck's Mound at Cahokia, Illinois, North America's largest mound, speaking directly to Europe's largest mound, or vice versa. Significant to significant, another level of the matrix I shall get into later on. We haven't found anything in Munck's Mound, so you shall find nothing in the Silbury. Something else I should point out while we are back here at Cahokia. Count up all the 90-degree corner angles on this archaeologically restored model of Munck's Mound. If you counted 20, you are correct. In the language of the code, that becomes 20 pi. Notice also that it has 4 terraces. That's 4 pi. Multiplied, 20 pi and 4 pi become 789.568, or 789 and a half. I am assured by the Illinois State Museum at Springfield that the original width of Munck's Mound was 790 feet, plus or minus 12 inches. Munck's shows us its original measurements. Who needs rulers? Thank you, Silbury. No, it isn't Silbury again, though there is some resemblance, but only from this angle. Flat-topped, 30-degree slope. The difference is that this mound is in Mexico at a place called La Venta. There's another difference too. It isn't a circle and never was. It is a series of ridges and gullies which radiate downward from the flattened summit. In all, 10 of each. And it has been verified. The gullies were deliberately made. They are not the result of natural erosion. Ten ridges, 10 gullies, 30-degree slope. And, of course, the pi ratio. And presto. Its latitude north of the equator. Notice something else here, namely the small ramp that extends off toward the northwest on an azimuth of 343.7 degrees. Those numbers link to the code, because 343.77 just happens to be exactly 6 radian. Anyway, this azimuth, when given to the 10 ridges and 10 gullies of the Venta pyramid, eagerly provide us with this monument's longitude to the west of the Great Pyramid. Its CI, or grid point, then, has a value of 36.475626. How does it speak to the global matrix? When we take the time to multiply it by the grid latitude of Stonehenge, 21,600 as shown earlier, it becomes the volume of the 360-degree sphere. 787,873.524 cubic degrees. For any who might like to check it, the formula is in red at the bottom. The value for R is the radian from the 360-degree circle. They explained all of this at the Quiquilco Pyramid, which I presented in my earlier release, the code 1994. If Venta's data comes as a shock to some, history does insist that these pre-Hispanics were ignorant, then prepare for another. The ancient Babylonians are generally credited for having spelled out the first mathematics, and the Greeks are believed to have put the polish on it somewhere between 500 BC and the time of Christ. America's La Venta Pyramid has been formally dated to 500 BC, which means it is most likely much older. Pi, in use in the West, before the time of the Greeks. Sorry, history. These pre-Hispanic deities were mathematical. La Venta is the only surviving mound here. There was once a lot of others, which could be easily seen from its summit. Unfortunately, they went down to our god, oil. Our next Pi-oriented mound is in Georgia. It goes by the name Etowah. The Etowah is a mound of respectable size, 333 by 380 feet at the base, and is exceeded in its proportions by very few other North American mounds, such as the 1,037-foot-long Munck's Mound, 670-foot-long Emerald Mound, and eastern New York's 800-foot-long Hoosick Mound. It is about 70 feet high. 4 squared corners at the base, 4 pi. 2 ramps, 2 pi. And 90-degree corners everywhere, 90. And voila, Etowah's latitude and the code value which encodes it. A word of caution if you visit the Etowah site. Stay on the paths. Do not wander off into grassy areas. The rattlesnakes are everywhere. And speaking of snakes, guess what happens when we divide Etowah's grid latitude of 7106.11 by 5? We are left with exactly 1421.223, the number which encodes the latitude of Ohio's Serpent Mound. And notice, please, that it has 5 coils. Now that we have all had our basic training on observations and the use of pi in finding things, we're ready for some graduate work. For this, we return to Guatemala, to a place called Tikal. The subject of this segment is Temple I, the so-called Temple of the Giant Jaguar. a magnificent pyramid that was built apparently by the Maya about 2,000 years ago.